Maestro Hamilton, we're back.
We're back, Aubrey.
Yeah, it's been a minute, man.
It's been a long minute.
Now it's go time. Kind of what we've been training for our whole lives is now coming to bear. And it's like, take what you got and start putting it to use in the world because it's time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You know, the last series of ceremonies we did, it was clear that it was mission on.
Yeah.
It was definitely go time. And the last years have shown us why.
He said that there's, a long time ago, one of the things that you taught me is like there's two primary forces, love and delusion. Help people kind of like unpack that concept of the idea of love as the universal force and then delusion as the opposing force, and like what that kind of means to you and how that's potentially evolved over the decade.
I think in that context, love is synonymous with source.
Right.
And love is meaning everything, but as a whole, in its totality, not piecemealed, not separated, not Hallmark card, not I love my mom or, I love my wife or I love my girlfriend or whatever. It's everything. It's the totality of the universe, the force of creation, this idea that there is no opposing force in absolute truth, in that instigating capacity to create. Just the universe started creating and it has not stopped. It's creating right now. It's creating through us. It's creating this podcast. It's creating everything that's going on in the world. And then the delusion comes in sometime in our history where we start to take our ideas and we use the mind and we use the imagination to create thoughts that are just fundamentally not based in fact anymore. And we use shapes and we use symbols and we use concepts and colors and beliefs and tradition all wrapped around it. And it becomes literally delusion, but it's so real to us. It's so palpable. It makes so much sense to us that we don't see that it's no longer representing just that pure force of creation.
Yeah.
And we're involved in it. We're in the middle of it. And so that delusion isn't independent of humanity. It's being created by humanity. It's fueled by source, but it's being created by us. And the biggest delusion of all is the us versus them concept within it. And that's truly the root of all evil in that delusion, is that there's some other them to be having that conflict with in the first place.
Yeah, it's a myth of separation at the very root of the story of delusion. And actually the creation of delusion, the genesis of delusion itself requires separation.
You get lost in fear along the way. And as soon as you get scared, you refract, you pull away from just being in the flow and being part of this natural state of consciousness. And thought starts to just like sonar pinging off of that fear into that place of delusion, and it just blows out. It's immediate, it's total, it's overwhelming, it's all encompassing. And then what do? Most people live in it all the time. And so when they're driving their car, they're in it. When they go to bed, they're in it. When they dream, they're in it. When they wake up and have their coffee, they're in it. They're brushing their teeth in it. They go to the bathroom in it, and they don't have an out. But, through different psychedelic work and ceremonial work, you can see through that delusion and you can say, oh, okay, all I need to do is calm down. I need to go to my source of love. I got to go back to my epicenter. And we used to, teach that through the heart. I mean, we still do, but
yeah,
when we first started talking about it, we'd say it's through this gateway, not through the brain gateway. So, go to the heart where the heart doesn't have the thoughts themselves and literally turn it off. And actually in the last week of ayahuasca sessions I was doing, we got into this situation where there was a lot of that at play. A lot of the guests that were there were really interested in exploring that delusion. And they were feeling like something, they were feeling like something was missing for not doing that, because the first ceremonies didn't have any of that in it. I kept all of that out.
Yeah.
And then they were coming to me going like, but I heard all these stories that it's supposed to be like, and they started comparing. And I'm like, okay. So going into the third ceremony, I let them turn it up, right? Dude, it became chaos in seconds and stuff like that. And then after that, I just literally turned it off, reset the entire ceremony, and then just started giving these commands just to turn ego down, turn fear down, turn the delusion off, awaken source, awaken the inner source, and then turned all of the medicine back on in the ceremony. And it was basically instantaneous. And it just showed that delusion's coming from us. And most of us are like into it like cotton candy.
And it almost feels like in order to get something of value, if there's going to be anything of value, it's got to be hard.
I always thought you got to deal with the hellish stuff in heaven. You don't want to go deal with it in hell. You're already in hell. You don't know how to deal with it there. You want to go deal with it in the nicest place possible. So I was like, You got to create the heaven health spa. You got to have all the helpers in there. You got to be completely relaxed and chilling. You're getting a foot massage.
Yeah.
That's when you deal with your
Shit.
shadow.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not dealing with my shadow in the shadow.
No.
That is the shadow.
I want it in the sex temple. That's what with the
I'm
priestesses.
sure you got that. I'm sure you've already figured that one out.
That's the move. That's the move. So I think it's difficult and also important for people to understand that sometimes you have to deal with things in a multidimensional way when they have multidimensional aspects.
Yeah, I mean, first, unpacking the idea of this top-down, control matrix, that's been in play in our mythology for 25, 30,000 years, 40,000 years. That's not a lot of time if we think of Earth's history, but for human history and for what we know of as being modern humans, that's an unbelievable amount of time. And so if we start to create that together, we can make that real. We can make that into something that truly exists in its own right. We have the capacity to be able to create entities. We create corporations. They're corporate entities in their own right. And so in that way, we've given life and energy so much to that idea of that matrix. It's now real, and it's something that we need to look at. It doesn't mean that it's universally true. It just means that it now exists.
Right.
It now becomes part of source. It becomes part of something that maybe we will have to ultimately deal with and unwind. You see it in families, like young parents who immediately have their first child and then all of a sudden create that matrix within their house. Their house had almost no rules. Now they have a kid, and now the whole house is rules.
Yeah.
And there's very little latitude or leeway to deal with it. The interdimensionality of it is really built into the construct of how we create that delusion in the first place. So we create a delusion and a refraction in fear. We step away from just innate reality. We step away from trust. We step away from love. We step away from something that's greater than just our individual life. We make everything temporal. Everything becomes past, present, future. Everything becomes this very, very finite amount of time that relates only to the body, right? This unbelievable fear associated with that. And then all the manipulations on top of that. Where that control matrix is being made is inside our brains.
Mm.
That's the thing that people don't really realize. They want to externalize it, but it's not. It's inside our brains. And if you look at our society where we have checks and balances, those checks and balances are built into the thought matrix in literally everything. So everybody's within that same control matrix. There isn't anybody in our society that's ultimately free from it, that's just walking around free swinging.
Well, we
do
can't be if we understand the connected nature of who we are.
Correct.
Like, we're all in a shared connected field. So if it exists, we are in contact with it. We're
Correct.
sharing with it.
That's why I say we're going to have to deal with our creation. So we have to unwind that delusion in that interdimensionality. And that's something that we can do through sacred plant ceremonies or ayahuasca ceremonies, because you can get in there and you can unhinge the fixations that and uncouple those fixations that make that all of a sudden, instead of something so constricted that you can't move it, you can't break it, you can't see beyond it, you can awaken it to being able to engage the field, release the fixations, open up and be able to see beyond those delusions. You wake up from the delusion, it almost seems silly, and it's sad and it's kind of crass in a way, but it seems silly when you see how simple the delusion really is when you wake up from it, and how little time it takes. It takes from like that, and the brain just goes click. And that is an interdimensional expression. When we look around us, we think we're seeing the world, but we're actually seeing the reflection of light, and we're seeing it inside our minds. It's a wild thing. We think the space around us is what it really is, but it's only a tiny, tiny bit of what it really is.
Yeah.
We make it beautiful, decorate it, change it up, put different shapes in it, different colors in it, but all of that's just stimulating our brains. When you open up beyond that, you realize that this is the interdimensional field. Our mythology lives within it. The entities that are associated with it live within it. What we see inside our sacred plant ceremonies lives within it. Mm-hmm. The fears that everybody has that you see propagated on the news and, by all different kinds of top-down organizations live within it. And it's just of that matrix. And it's our decision what we're going to ultimately do with it, which is why I think it's time for the real mission to be on, which is to evolve us to the next level beyond the need for that.